is the Constitution that we know today in effect, or is there a different Constitution that you claim?
Unfortunately, we are being snookered by the Congress because every 2 years they reintroduce a state of martial law. And we are not under our first Constitution. We are under this second secret Constitution. What that Constitution provides is that our tax dollars are going to pay interest to the Federal Reserve. They're not paying for any of the services that we need in our country. Instead, where are we getting the money? We're getting it from the poppy fields in Afghanistan and the drug trade. That's how we're financing our country. This is a travesty.
Now, you mentioned that the secret Constitution allows for the interest to be paid to the Federal Reserve. But isn't that the Federal Reserve Act that we know that was established in 1913 when it was passed on Christmas Eve? So where does that law fall into place?
You'll remember that President Lincoln was assassinated by a Jesuit.
Mm-hmm.
That was in order to prevent the greenback dollars that Lincoln had issued directly by the Treasury Department. And so what happened was the bank of that day was then able to continue to earn interest on the currency of the United States. That was why he was assassinated. And the reason why we had that second Constitution enacted in 1871 is that is when the Revolutionary War debts fell due. As a matter of fact, one day I opened my mail and somebody mailed me the financing statement for those debts that, together with the unpaid interest on the debts, had accrued to the trillions of dollars.
Now, the concept of a secret Constitution, some people might cry foul there. I don't believe a word you're saying because I've never heard of such a thing. How can those claims be substantiated?
Two ways. The first is that I will show you the minutes of the meeting of the patriots who met and looked at the State House records in Carolina when that secret Constitution was enacted. And I can show you the financing statements for the Revolutionary War debt. That was the reason we got that second secret Constitution.
So is that second secret Constitution, who is it in favor of? Is it in favor of the people or the corporate United States?
It's in favor of the banks. It's certainly not in favor of the people. What happens when you have a child is your child is given a Social Security number. They estimate how many taxes your child is going to pay over his or her lifetime. And they take that birth certificate and they issue it on the capital markets and they earn money on it.
Okay, so what you're saying is that the birth certificate itself creates a monetary value on the books with the Federal Reserve?
I'm saying something much worse, actually. What I'm saying is that when every citizen goes into the court system, they are not seen there as themselves a U.S. citizen. They're seen as the person who had their birth certificate pledged. You're there as a debtor. You're not there as a citizen.
So, because of the national debt, are you saying that Americans they're just born into debt and there's nothing that they can really do about it? They're debtors in the system.
We have been converted from human beings that are citizens of the Republic of the United States into chattel. Chattel, that is a legal term for something which is property. We are now considered to be property of the Federal Reserve. We're not considered to be human beings and citizens of the United States.
That's a very strong statement. How do we reverse that? If that is in fact the true statement, how do we reverse that?
The first thing we do is we recognize it. We understand it. And then the second thing we do is we have that constitutional convention, which is our right under our first Constitution, and we repeal that banker's constitution. We repeal it, we get rid of it, we do not want it, we do not need it, and we issue our treasury dollars backed by the gold out of the collateral account that has been offered to us.
Some people are very concerned about Article 5 convention, wherein you may have powers, money powers, that could inject themselves into that convention process where the Constitution is rewritten. A lot of people are very concerned that some of the very basic rights that are instilled and enshrined in the Bill of Rights would then be evaporated. Maybe the freedom of the press would be changed to only specific sanctioned outlets can speak freely, or even the Second Amendment would have to be rewritten to only allow certain people to carry firearms to protect others. So there's a lot of people who do have valid concerns with an Article 5 convention. Do you share those concerns?
I say that that is a very good proof to me of just how corrupted our media is. Because if we had a true media that was representing the interests of the citizens, they would know that that is not a concern whatsoever. Because what happens out of that convention is simply recommendations, which have to be voted up or down by 3/4 of the state legislatures.
Do you think the money powers would have enough lobbying capacity to lobby for those 3/4 of the states? I mean, if you think back to when the 16th Amendment was passed, even though it was passed illegally and it wasn't properly ratified by 3/4 of the states, it still became an amendment, and we now are under an income tax system. So if you think about 3/4 of the states ratifying an Article 5 convention, do you believe that the money powers could have influence in that process?
I would simply ask your viewers to take a good look at whether we have a second secret constitution, how we got that constitution, and whether we in the United States have the wherewithal to throw off those shackles. And if we don't, we deserve them.
So where is the second constitution? Where is it? Where do they keep it? What does it say?
The second constitution consists of the fact that we are paying interest on our debt when we could simply have clean treasury dollars backed by gold.
Is it a constitution in the same sense that we understand our constitution as today? Now, when I think of the Constitution, I think of old parchment and handwritten script, and I think of the founding fathers and writing this document out. So when I think of a second constitution, is it fair to say that is this another document that written in the same manner, or is it? Help me visualize what this document says.
What it is it's the Act of 1871, where Maryland and Virginia created this square mile of the District of Columbia, and then they incorporated the United States as a company, and they made the President of the United States the Chief Executive Officer, and they made the representatives of Congress managers. And so when people come to Congress, they're taught very quickly that their constituents are not what it's all about. What it's all about is for them to get on the dole of the federal government, which is there to enslave the people who live in the United States. That's what that is.
So is it fair to call it a constitution then, or is it more or less when Maryland and Virginia created Washington, D.C. as its own district of Columbia as we know it today?
Well, it's more than that, because the federal courts, the judges, are not sitting there in courts of equity. They're secretly treating us as if we are property of the United States. When we come in there, we are not there in a court of equity. So yes, it is a different arrangement with our government.